Welcome back, lovely viewers. A plasma update. Now, you know I'm always knocking on about laser-induced plasma making UAP visualizations, and a lot of people have said that it doesn't work. It's a figment of my imagination. Well, I think it's really matured as an idea, and I'd like to tell you a story. First of all, we have a great family friend who worked at the Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton in California, and they are the center of this adaptive optics, whereby wiggling a mirror you can take out the twinkles in our atmosphere and get incredibly sharp astronomical images from Earth through our atmosphere. But he told me that the whole concept of adaptive optics came from Lawrence Livermore, who was working on SDI or Star Wars in the 70s and 80s, because they wanted to take the wiggle out of lasers in our atmosphere as a directed energy weapon. And it spread to the astronomy community, and the Lick was very involved in building these modulated mirrors to look at things non-twinkly in space. But they did something else. To make adaptive optics work, to know how to wiggle the mirror, how to take out the twinkle, and how to get images like this, they needed to know how much our atmosphere was bending light and making the twinkle. To do that, they invented this, a guide star. And again, this all came about in the 70s and 80s through Lawrence Livermore, because they had a defense contract for lasers and spread into the astronomical community. The telescopes use sodium lasers, these 4 lasers that focus into a spot. They don't have to be very powerful, and that's the clue. By shining 4 lasers together, you make a focal spot that produces ionization, a glowing ball of plasma which you can move. And that all happened in the 1980s. So where are we today? First of all, the lasers that produce the spot of plasma don't have to be visible. They can be in the X-ray part of the electromagnetic spectrum, not visible to the human eye. And they still produce a spot of ionized air. And as you know, you wonderful viewers to my channel, I've been knocking on about this for years, saying that it's now possible to make a 3D visualization using a laser spot, using a guide star technology that can draw an aircraft, that can draw a tic-tac. And now I believe that idea is becoming a bit more mainstream. Vinny from the Disclosure team asked Avi Loeb whether it might be possible that UAPs are a laser projection. This is Avi's reply.
The next question comes from Penny. Does Mr. Loeb think plasma has an integral part to play in UAP presentation, a precursor?
Yeah, so a plasma is a hot gas. Basically, you take, for example, air, and you heat it up to very high temperatures such that the atoms collide with each other and break up into free electrons and ions. So that's what a plasma is. It's just a state of gas where the atoms are broken into their constituents, the charges, the electrons and the ions. And so you get that naturally when, for example, you have an explosion, or when an object is moving very fast through air such that it heats up the air to high temperatures, or when you shine a powerful laser on air and you create a local explosion, then you get plasma. When you detonate an explosive, you get a plasma. You also get it in the sun, where there is nuclear burning in the center, and so everything. Actually, most of the ordinary matter in the universe is broken up to free electrons and ions, and it's in the state of a plasma. But when our body and everything we look around us, the solid matter is not a plasma. It's made of atoms where the charges are held together. So at any event, the plasma is relevant in the sense that if you have an object moving very fast and it interacts with the air, it will create a plasma around it because it will heat up the air. And we see that with meteors. We see the fireball that I mentioned before, that's the energy released by the friction of the object with the air. And we see also around airplanes that move very fast. We see that around rockets that move, around projectiles that move through air, especially if they move supersonically. They produce a shock wave that heats up the air and breaks up the atoms and molecules into electrons and ions. So definitely relevant. Another context where it's relevant is if, it was not really objects that, for example, the Navy pilots were seeing. It was a laser beam focused on air. Just like, sometimes people try to fool cats and they shine a laser spot and move it around very fast. And it's not a real object. The cat thinks that it's a real object. So you can, in principle, fool, pilots by generating a laser beam, shining it, on a spot in the air, creating some plasma ball there, and that would reflect the radio waves. And so the pilot would think, oh, wow, there is an object there, but it's not really an object. It's just a ball of hot air that you create by the laser focus there. And then you can move the laser very quickly to another spot, and you will think, wow, this object really moves fast. So it could be that some of the incidents relate to this phenomena, and someone was just shining laser beams and fooling the pilot. I don't know, but the point is, we want to figure it out, and it's just that the data from the past is not good enough for us to tell what it was.
So if, for example, you mentioned there these lasers potentially fooling people, if you were to see a plasma acting in what seemed to be a controlled way, how would you be able to differentiate between it being a laser or something genuinely not of this earth?
So if you have a high frame rate, you can tell that, there is a spot at one point and then it goes away, and then another spot is created at another point, but it's not an object moving through the sky from one spot to another. You would be able to tell that it's two different occurrences, two explosions that were created, presumably with a laser.
Thanks, Avi. You really can't forget that military technology, rightly so, is at least 50 years of consumer products that we can buy. Our MacBook is ancient technology that they drip feed upgrades for us to go out and buy every year, whereas the military are on stuff that you can't even dream about. The new rollout of the stealth bomber is a classic example. What they really have is unmanned aircraft. Get the pilot out of the cockpit. This aircraft, I believe, is the final curtain to manned military flight, because you just don't need humans in the cockpit anymore. And I don't think you really have to have pilots in this aircraft. Although it appears to have a cockpit, you can't really see who's sitting inside it. And this is where we're going. We're taking humans out of direct conflict, and we're fighting wars with virtual reality. The modern Air Force will consist of 1 or 2 unmanned physical aircraft surrounded by a drone swarm of projected holographic laser-induced plasma visualizations. Totally the same radar signature and totally confusing to the enemy. You heard it here first. In 10 years' time, come back and leave a comment going, "Hey, Professor, you were right," because the truth is out there.